It's the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast, where we talk about all things consensual non-monogamy, polyamory, open relationships, swinging, and how you can have secure and sexy relationships, no matter how you do them. Now here's your hosts, Tara and Andre.
So hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast. So today, we're going to dive into the topic, relationship rules by the numbers, 111 to one of our favorite numbers, 69. But before we jump in, let's do some introductions in case this is the first time someone's listening to us. So I am Tara Lynn Franco. I am a relationship and awesomeness coach.
You certainly are. And I am Andre Turcott. I am a sex-positive psychotherapist.
And you certainly are as well.
Right.
We're here because we love to support individuals and couples navigate non-monogamy so that they can create successful, secure, and sexy relationships. Kind of like ours.
Kind of like us.
So we do this through this podcast, our online community, and through our various coaching programs and services, and our Poly Newbies digital course. So you can find the links to all these things and other awesome resources that we're going to reference today in the show notes. Andre, I know you're not a big social media person, but I'm curious if you've heard that viral song Finance.
You're asking the wrong person. I live under a rock, so no, I've not heard it, but tell me about it, please.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because it did go viral. It's this person called Girl on Couch, and it's like, I'm looking for a man in finance. Trust fund, 6'5", blue eyes. Finance, trust fund, 6'5", blue eyes.
Okay.
And I mean, she did it a bit of as a joke to poke fun at people who have these kind of rules they follow. And, because she said she knows single friends that say, oh, I can't find somebody to date, but then they have these particular very small windows of things that they must fit into. And so I was thinking about that as we were preparing for this podcast.
Yeah, no, it might be played off as if it's tongue in cheek. It's kind of funny, but yeah, actually it's not so far from the truth. In fact, I'm working with somebody right now, and one of her preferences, which she's perfectly entitled to, is she would like to find a guy who's over 6 something. And that's great. But as we discovered, it really does limit her, right? So you have your preferences, you have your rules, you have your guides, and it's interesting to see how they may benefit you or how they may, in fact, handicap you.
And so there's tons of rules and guides out there. And I think people try to cleverly use numbers to describe what you should or shouldn't do in relationships or in dating. So 111, 222, 333, and so on.
Yeah.
And so we're going to take a informative and probably humorous look at these relationship rules, debunk some of them, and, as always, provide some solid advice on things you might want to consider to have. Awesome.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? These little rules or guides, whatever, some of them may actually hold a lot of benefits to them and may be kind of helpful in that sense, but some of them we don't really know the author to, and maybe they are just somebody fooling around, and it seems to roll around in our heads in a kind of enjoyable way. But like cliches, a lot of these have been around for some time. Cliches stick around because they are actually kind of proven over and over again, right? Because if they really were not that effective or not that applicable, we would probably let go of them and they wouldn't become cliche. So some of these may be kind of similar to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when we were preparing for this, you were telling me about, the need we have as humans to have rules or guides.
Often we see that in organized religions, right? People may not want to have rules around them, and yet having it laid out for them, being told how to act or how to think or how to feel might be very comforting in a way, especially if it is new or unknown to us. And I think we've also done that as well. We've put forth, 69 rules of dating or whatever it might be, and how we do that as a way of kind of troubleshooting or helping people say, well, these are the things that we've discovered. These are the things that have been tried and true by others, and they may be helpful to you. So there is this kind of comforting part to it as well.
Yeah, and I think that's why if parenting experts out there talk about why children need rules and discipline, because they provide order to them, they help them know what to expect, and when they're applied in a consistent way, they can give comfort and reassurance. So that's kind of why we do this. Why while we say we want to be free and be boundless, we also want to have the comfort of knowing what's coming up and what we can expect. And I think the same is true in relationships and dating. And now I'm not talking about rules as in rules people set up to protect their polyamorous relationships, because as you know, we like to talk about agreements rather than punitive rules. We're just talking about those rules or guidelines people use, how they wish to do those things rather than what they can't do. And I think you said this as well, that life doesn't always fit so perfectly into these rules. But we need to sort of alter them and see how they apply to our lives and use them to our benefit.
Yeah, that's a great point, because maybe it doesn't completely apply to you, or not all of it is tailored to what would be best for you. So we consider them. We take out the kernels of what might be good, and then we are able to utilize that, or we just debunk the whole thing and say, well, that's just nonsense, whatever might fit.
Okay, well, let's start with number one and see where we go.
Okay.
So 111. I don't know if did we make this one up, Andre?
Right. So the 111 rule very often is stated that it's one vagina for one penis for one lifetime. And I don't think we made this up. I think that this describes to a great many Western cultures, or many cultures, not just in the West, but often seen where there is organized religion, the idea of monogamy, right? So we have one person that will be our person, we will be their one person for the rest of our lives. And it's very much a mono model, right? One to one to one. And it works so well for so many people. But again, it's not the only way of being, right? And that's another reason I think why it's so important for us to come on here, is that we want to help normalize, or at least start conversations about other possible options. So for the longest time, growing up, I thought there would only be that one person in my life, and that was the only one choice. Actually, maybe one of the ones would be one choice, as though there is no choice. That's how it had to be. And by having these talks, we can announce another way of being. You don't have to subscribe to it, but there are other ways of looking at this. So it doesn't have to be a one vagina, one penis, one lifetime kind of deal. And if you don't subscribe to that, you should not be made to feel as though you are in any way less significant or less valid. So this helps to hopefully normalize it and destigmatize choices that might fall outside of those options.
It's a choice, right? And I'm not one of those people that thinks that monogamy is wrong or anything like that. Like you said, I think it works for some people, and that's awesome if it does. If you're in a partnership where it works for both people, like awesome, and go for it. But that's not the case for anyone. When we were thinking about I was thinking about the one penis policy, the OPP, that sometimes people have set up as a relationship rule when they first open a relationship.
What's interesting about the OPP, one penis, is that often, it seems, it is often the penis who is dictating the one penis. So we can have several vulvas or vajayjays in the room, but it should only be one penis. And that kind of goes back to ownership and, a whole different subject in its own. But it's interesting because I wonder if it exists in other frontiers where it could be one vajayjay and many penis, right? So, can we flip that? Can we accept or allow for a different model that maybe not be as familiar to us?
Yeah, I think people do have that model, but the OPP is quite interesting, and this idea that it's okay for a woman, like if you're in a relationship and you're opening up that relationship, for a woman to be with another woman, but they wouldn't want the other person, the woman, to be with a man, unless the man was interested in that, because that sometimes happens too.
It comes in all shapes and sizes, right? So this was one that we brought up because we had found it in literature. But yeah, it does by no means suggest that there should only be this way of looking at it. It could be one triangle with many circles, or one circle with many triangles. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, let's jump into the twos. So we found, there's tons of these out there, but we found two. So two twos, and one applies to relationships, and one applies maybe more to events. And so the 222 rule, expert Laura Berman writes that committed couples should go on a date once every 2 weeks, spend a weekend away every 2 months, and take a week-long vacation every 2 years. What do you think about that one, Andre?
Well, it's so funny because on some parts, I'm going to go to the vacation part right away. I think it's great that some people have the luxury to go on vacation. And at the same time, if we can only afford 1 week every 2 years, I think that's kind of sad. But that's a whole question of capitalism and where we're putting our priorities. I would like to think that we're able to go away a little bit more often than that. And it doesn't have to be extravagant. But really what I do like about this is the idea that we are tabling quality time together, that we are already talking about how this should be, as opposed to it just kind of going one day after another, and before we know it, a year has passed and we really haven't done any of these things. We are making a commitment to each other saying, well, we're going to spend this quality time, that we are prioritizing this, that this is important to us. So I like that part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think, and this happens too, and when people open up a relationship or begin to be polyamorous, that when they get that influx of new relationship energy, which we did a whole podcast on, with a new partner, they might make all kinds of plans for special dates and that sort of thing with them. And if they have an existing partner that they either nest with or not, that's, been around for a while, you do need to make time and effort towards quality time for that relationship. And, it's a key, I think, to successful non-monogamous relationships.
Yeah, I totally agree. What's interesting also is that Dr. Berman mentions how this might be applicable for committed couples. And it's so interesting because when I go on dating sites, for example, I often see profiles that are asking for a serious or a committed relationship. And I have the idea that they are implying it be monogamous and exclusive, whereas you and I, after 7 years, I would say that we are probably rather committed, and it does feel rather serious. So it's not exclusive to being a monogamous, right? The commitment comes in how we're going to show up from each other, and how are we going to communicate, how we're going to be there.
There's a myth out there that you can't be in a committed, serious relationship if you're open or polyamorous. It just can't be. And I guess that's, some of that monogamous mindset sort of creeping in, and monogamy being that normalized model of relationships.
It's funny that you say that, because it makes me think sometimes how, and I don't know factually, but how the poly community might in any way be threatening to their mono model. And yet I don't see monogamy as threatening to my poly model. As long as we're all free to have our own choices, I'm not going to go and try and convert people into polyamory. I'm not going to try and convince them to open up their relationship. The same way that I hope that they are not in any way threatened by the idea that we might feel that our way is just as viable as theirs.
Yeah. And then the other two rule was something I think you found about making guest lists for parties. Can you explain that?
Well, again, going into these kind of het norm models, in our experience, a lot of these parties or even clubs that we go to might have a couple kind of standard. So it's 1-to-1, one guy, one girl, I guess I could say, and that is kind of the norm. So when we're making an invite list to our party, to our orgy, to our gathering, we might say, well, we're going to have boy to girl, boy to girl, boy to girl, and it kind of creates a certain dynamic, as opposed to saying, well, we don't want to overload it with, let's say, too many sausages compared to oysters at our buffet. But sometimes we might say, well, it's actually better to have a few extra oysters, because we might have some that are going to kind of take one for the team. They're going to be the pinch hitters. They'll step up to kind of offset the quotas and satisfy the margins. Does that make any sense?
This is the humorous part of the podcast, for sure.
Hopefully.
So the idea is, and I think that's a common one, is when people plan parties, like lifestyle, swinging sort of parties, that they do it in groups of twos, but are open to the additional ones being oysters, vulva owners.
Right.
And it's interesting. And we were talking about this recently, and how, at a party I think that we hosted, we did invite all couples. We didn't have individuals. And what ended up happening at one point, as sometimes happens, is some of the women sort of tapped out and were wanting to be a bit more social. And it ended up that there was like very few women engaged in play, and it felt a little imbalanced. So it's sort of an interesting phenomenon.
Right. So two of the guests there were speaking directly to this question and saying, well, when they host a party, they do consider inviting single women to kind of offset that imbalance. So that way it's not falling upon just a certain number of women to kind of avail themselves, shall I say? Hopefully they're wanting to do it as well. But it sometimes it could be almost like a cue of guys wanting to go their turn. I don't know how to say it in delicate terms, but you get the gist of what I'm saying, I'm sure.
I guess women are more likely to take more breaks in these kinds of situations, and that's why it causes imbalance. I don't know,
Right,
but
okay.
it's an interesting thing that people who've never been to a party or club or something like that may not be aware of. So it's
Right,
interesting.
but there's something for everybody, right? Because on the other side of that, their concern is that, well, it might turn into kind of a sausage fest. There'll be too many guys. But if that's your jam too, I mean, there are a lot of people who love gangbangs and see no issue with it, and that's their jam, right? So again, never yuck somebody else's yam. Yeah, that's such a great. You gave me that. I love that. That's so cool.
Did you say yak somebody's yam?
Yeah.
Instead
Yak
of yuck
yum?
somebody's yum?
Okay, so not yak somebody's yum. Yum. Sweet potatoes, baby. They're good.
Sweet potatoes. Oh my God. All right. Let's move on to the threes.
Okay.
So there's a 3-3-3-1. That's a dating one. And I thought this one was interesting. So the idea is that you date when you're, I'm assuming, single and dating 3 people at the same time for 3 months, and to give them 3 chances if something comes up.
That's so interesting. So right away, I give them 3 chances. So am I already looking to find fault with these people? Am I already looking for ways to kill them off? Right? As opposed to, well, it's a non-issue, and if it comes up, then I'll deal with it then. But am I already out there, already at number 2? What's the third one going to be? I'm waiting for that shoe to fall. But then also dating this, I'm looking for 3 people. Do I already have a plan for them, an objective for them? Am I looking to create a certain calendar with people on it, and I'm needing to slot them into it, as opposed to it really developing organically and just happening to meet them? That's all.
Okay. All right. I was waiting because sometimes I jump in too fast. I think the idea is that, it's an okay balance to date 3 people, not to suggest you necessarily have to wait till you find 3 people and that you must date 3 people. But I think the idea is to be open to experiencing that. But then, what happens after the 3 months, right? Do you have to decide to travel on that relationship escalator with one of them? And so it's an interesting one.
Yeah, that's a very good point, right? Because often when we speak, you and I, when we speak about the relationship escalator, it seems most often used in the context of it being applied towards monogamy, that you meet somebody and then you kind of go steady and you move in, you get married, blah, blah, blah. And how does that happen in an open relationship? Are we also saying, well, I would like to have this person in my life, I'd like to have these people in my life, and do I automatically start to scale them or put them into a certain direction, unbeknownst to them, unbeknownst to ourselves even? Right? So do we already have this kind of thing? And again, not that there's anything wrong with it, but are we aware of that? It makes me think of the next little part of that, the 3-month rule, right? Where we say no kissing, no sex, no sleepovers, no exclusivity for 3 months. Could we do 3 months, or is 3 weeks a little bit more manageable? Because, I think about it in my own experience of going on, let's say in 3 months, getting to know somebody, I will probably have at least 2 or 3 dates, I'm hoping, over that 3 months with them, because otherwise it really
probably more, no?
Yeah, probably more. So to say that I would really go without any kissing, I don't know how it would be received, and I don't know how much interest I would have in it. To say no sex in 3 weeks or in 3 dates, I could probably swing that, but I don't know that I'd be able to do it for the 3-month period. My concern is that I might, or the other person might, find it too prolonged. They might actually kind of lose interest in it, but it could be interesting. It's not to say that I've never done that. In fact, I've gone for an extended period of time just getting to know the person. I thought it was wonderful, but it seems to be possibly the exception. What do you think about this timeline?
Yeah, I think 3 months is a long time, unless, like you say, it's spread out and, you only see them because of maybe distance or something in 3 months, like 3 times in 3 months. But I mean, kissing, I kind of like to kiss. Sometimes I kiss on the first date and sometimes not, I definitely don't have sex on the first date, or very rarely. I'm just trying to think, did we kiss on our first date? I don't think we did.
No, we held hands and we stood at the corner for quite a while, but so back to the list.
Back to the list. So yeah, and I mean the idea of dating 3 people at the same time, I just wanted to go back to that one because I was thinking about when people feel like they're polysaturated. So, and maybe 3 people is, and you're in an open relationship or you're polyamorous, is 3 a good number? And it may or may not be, depending on the circumstances in those 3 relationships.
And it's interesting that we should do it in an ethically open way, that the other people might know that we are dating other people while dating them. Going back to my not too long ago history, before I became outspoken this way, if I was dating somebody and then found interest in somebody else, then I was with a dilemma. Well, how am I going to announce it? How am I going to let them know that I am seeing other people? And how is it going to be received? My concern was how it was going to be received. Did they think then that it implied that I did not have deep caring feelings for them, that I was just a so-called player, even if I did have deep wanting, yearning, long-term ideas for them, right? So how is it received? And then also, I think about what the scenario might be like for you. If you were to tell some guys or girls, whoever, that you are wanting to date multiple people at the same time, do they automatically start to make other assumptions about you? Right? So it's interesting how it is announced, but I think the only way to do it is to be open about it and say that, I'm not looking to get into this exclusive relationship, that I am poly, that I do date people simultaneously or perhaps individually, but that I'm not necessarily subscribing to an exclusive model. I think that's the most important part, that we be open about it.
Yeah, I agree. And that's something that we have in our dating guide and something that I follow on my online profiles. I always say I'm polyamorous, I identify as polyamorous. People don't always read it. But I think it's even if you meet someone organically, I think it's important to share that what you want, or even if you're a monogamous and you're dating multiple people, I think it's like, and want to eventually form a monogamous relationship, I think it's important to share that you are dating other people. So people know some of my story around how I came to non-monogamy. Well, I ended up in a friends with benefits situation that I wasn't even aware of, because I met someone, we met as friends, we were dating, we were both dating other people. I never made any assumptions. But at one point, several months down the line, I thought that we were on the relationship escalator and that they weren't dating or having sex with other people, only to find out when I asked that fateful question, like, so what's going on here? And they said friends with benefits. I was like, what? And at the time I didn't identify, nor was I looking for a non-monogamous relationship. So it was a surprise to me. And I think had I known, I might have either made different choices or was able to figure out a way to accept it before being surprised about it. So yeah.
Right. You could have consented either way, right? As opposed to being surprised. Yeah. So it sounds as though we did not have that conversation before getting into it.
So another one of there's lots of 3 rules. Maybe I think 3 is like kind of like one of those magic numbers. So the other one is 3 points of contact before the date to get the vibe and maybe feel safe. 3 dates to collect data. 3 months, and I think you put brackets, weeks, to see if you want to take things to the next level.
Yeah. Well, maybe 3 months is your comfort level, right? I'm just saying that for myself, I think I would already possibly know within 3 dates, even if there were 3 days, but 3 weeks or 3 months, it does give us some time to sit and digest it, see how we really feel about it, and see what it is. The 3 points of contact, I'm not quite sure what that means. Is that through phone, email, and texting? I wasn't quite clear on that, but it is interesting how we can allow ourselves to be present and really kind of get in tune with what is the feeling that we are getting from this as well, right?
Yeah, I think the 3 points of contact is, some people have a strict rule about not meeting anyone in person before they've had like a video chat or phone call or something like that. So not just by text or by an app or that sort of thing. So actually just listening to their voice, understanding they're real, maybe seeing them on video. And part of that's a safety thing. And, I just heard this recently for someone I know who lives in the US, that they said, oh yeah, there's so many fake people that it's important to know that the person that you're meeting with is real. And I was like, wow, like I don't think about that a ton. I feel like I can get a sense basically by the way the text is going. And I'm one that I don't like to go like back and forth a lot, because I just lose interest. I don't have time to text with someone for 3 months. I want to know if there's someone I want to meet. So I'll meet in public for a date and check it out. That's my preference. Although somebody I had met online thought that was very strange and thought it was weird that I didn't want to talk on the phone first. And I just think talking on the phone is for me is uncomfortable when you don't know the person, which is strange. Like not in the rest of my life, but in the dating life, for some reason, it's strange. I can talk to anybody, but like someone I might date, I don't know. I just can't get the vibe on the phone.
How interesting. And yet I think, I thank you for sharing that about the points of contact, because yeah, maybe there are safety issues that I never think of, or just not in our experience, but yeah, we should always be safety first. But I think it's interesting about the phone, because I might not be so tempted or wanting to do that either. But at the same time, don't we get a lot from how the person sounds, or so we imagine we get a lot from it. Dr. Hyman Spotnitz always said that you know somebody within the first 5 minutes. You know the essence of them. We might not know the details, but essentially we know. But it reminds me also of what we often say, and that's try everything at least twice. Maybe some things we really know we don't have to, like jumping off a bridge or heroin. We say, no, I don't even have to try it once, I know. But in most other things, maybe we try it at least twice. And the first time we have one opinion about it, and maybe we're surprised by it or not. And the second time, it may give us a different experience or may confirm that. So maybe those 3 dates, the first time we're not so impressed. The second time they might like more, or vice versa, whatever. So remain open to it and try it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Sometimes, and I mean, I've done this myself, is I meet somebody on an app or something, and we're talking and texting, and I like the way they write, and I feel like we've got a good vibe. And then we meet in person, it's like, wah, wah, And so it's so interesting. I think that's, kind of part of what's behind that as well. And then the point you made about you know somebody in the first 5 minutes, I've definitely heard that before. And I think what happens sometimes, if we get all those like excited feelings, we sometimes ignore some of those early signs.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I don't want to scare everybody, but what happens when we come across, say, like a narcissist, and we're being love bombed, and they are doing everything in their power to make us feel a certain way about them.
Yeah, you have to be aware of the love bombing. If somebody's love bombing you, it feels great, but I think you have to have your spidey senses up to understand what's really behind that, if it's real and true. So, yeah. But it's hard. Love bombing can be very appealing, right?
Well, I'm trying to think back to when you and I might have done that unconsciously, that we were just so caught up in that new relationship energy, and you're wanting to do these things, and you're like, hey, let's do this together, let's do that together, or whatever it might be. To what extent do we do that? Maybe it's not really love bombing in the actual sense of it, but maybe it kind of has some of the similar aspects to that feeling that's created in that excitement.
Given that you told me don't fall in love with you, I don't know how much love bombing there was there, but we did do a lot of fun and exciting things at the beginning. So it wasn't, I don't think, the typical love bombing.
Is that to say that those things have passed? Do we no longer do those fun and exciting things?
Oh, we absolutely do those things all the time. Every day is an adventure with you, honestly. I think that's part of the secret to our long-lasting relationship, is that we're always making efforts to make it fun and interesting and exciting and adventurous. So
perhaps so.
Something I really love about you.
Are we going to go over the 3-6-9 rule?
Yeah, quickly, we can do that one. I know we've been talking a lot about the threes. So
yeah. So when I was looking it up, I found this 3-6-9 rule, and there was somebody on TikTok. Her name is Annabelle Gesson, and I'm guessing that's how she says Gesson. And she's a younger she's a younger person. She speaks, and I mean younger by like very younger. And anyway, she broke down the 3-6-9 rule as being the first 3 months of relationship. She calls that the honeymoon phase, which in my old age, I thought that was the first 12 to 18 months of a relationship or of a marriage. But as I say, she's quite young, so maybe 3 months does feel like a very long time. And we've got the first honeymoon phase, and that everything is wonderful. And we, as she says, we will be madly in love with each other, which is awesome, right? And then after the 6 months, she says we then enter into the rocky phase. And that's where we start to find out who the person really is and how we might have some friction in the relationship. And then should we make it to 9 months, well, then we are in the comfort stage. And that's where we claim to have known more about the other person, but we take comfort in knowing that we were able to withstand the rocky phase of getting to know each other. And according to Miss, she says that we will have a very good chance of the relationship lasting, which is made me think back to somebody I worked with, and it was an elderly priest from Africa. And he told me in all seriousness and sincerity that we could only really tell if people were going to stay together if they had been together for at least 35 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge number, but I know you've said that to many people we know that have been together for that long and have asked them the question. And I mean, this is really interesting, this 3-6-9 rule. And I have heard this, although I don't think that we truly know somebody after 9 months. But the 3-month thing is interesting because sometimes, or even within 9 months, people are still, I feel, in the honeymoon phase, like you said, in the first 18 months. And it's important definitely not to make any life-altering decisions during that time period when you're still in that honeymoon phase, however long it lasts. And I think we'll talk about it a bit. I think it's in the 10-10-10 rule. But yeah, I think we need to wait to make life-altering decisions in that honeymoon phase.
Yeah, we often suggest that people take at least one trip around the sun together before making any big decisions. And yet, I just spoke to somebody not long ago. They both their leases were up at the same time, and they decided after 3 months of knowing each other to move in with each other. And now here they are years later, they're married, they have a business together, they're talking about having a baby together soon. So, I mean, these are not hard, fast rules, right? But the people that I just cited, are the exception from my knowledge. So I think it's just pretty good standard stuff. As much as we may be in the honeymoon phase or infatuated with this person, it's sometimes harder to undo the decisions we make in the heat of the moment. So maybe, enjoy the ride, and let's not be in quite such a hurry to make these grand gestures, because they may not seem the same way 6 months, 9 months later. So,
I mean, I made the decision. Well, I agreed to a proposal, my first marriage, after I think 9 months. And that one didn't last that long. We were engaged for a year and then married for another 2. So, and I definitely was young then. So that's another thing I would suggest to anyone thinking about getting married in their early 20s is like not to.
It's interesting, right? That you were young then. So in other words, if you look at it like an equation, you had the majority of your time still ahead of you, but there was this kind of rush to get married as opposed to kind of waiting a little bit longer. But what is the rush?
Well, that's it, right? I think I was in love. I was excited. This was an exciting proposition. But at 24, I still had my whole life together. I didn't have my career yet. I hadn't decided where I was going. And I think most people make significant changes in their life in that period between 24 and 30. I mean, we have lots of stages of our lives, but that's a huge transformation because you're finished school, you're working for the first time, or maybe you're going back to school, whatever it is. And we change a lot in that time period. We mature, and the way we look at life becomes a lot different. And so it's an early time. But anyway, All right. So let's go into the 4s. So 444. I think you wrote this one.
I did, yeah. So again, on a very quick Google search, thank you, Google. This comes up as a person who thinks and acts in an uninhibited way without worrying about normal social rules. And that's all I had to say. I don't know how the 4s fit in.
Where do the 4s fit in?
Well, I have no idea. And that's all that was written there. There was nothing further to it. I'm not quite sure how it is, but I do like the idea of how a person can think and act uninhibitedly without worrying about social norms or rules, right? So I think for myself, I've often come across people who say, oh, I love that you're so open and outspoken about being polyamorous. I wish I could do the same. That's fair. And I ask them, well, what holds them back? And they're like, well, it's not really socially accepted where I come from, or it's not the norm, or they might look at me as if I'm kind of weird or whatever. And well, if we don't stand together and announce our position as being just as normal, then it will always be seen as perverse, right? So what's the worst thing that happens? They don't understand and you have a conversation about it, or maybe they fire you, or they pin you to a cross. I don't know. But if we don't do anything about it, are we only then participating in the dynamic as it is? I'm in a position of advantage. I can talk about these things, and there's not much that can come back to haunt me. So I can be sympathetic to their place, but then it makes me, and perhaps others who can stand like me, in front and say, well, this is just as normal. This is just as acceptable.
Well, this past week was the week of visibility for non-monogamy. And they had a theme every day. And one of the themes, and I did a TikTok on this, was about public and private. And I think being visible as somebody who's non-monogamous is a personal choice. And neither is right or wrong. And like you said, I think we do have some privilege in that we're able to be out and visible as non-monogamous people, but some people don't have the same opportunity. And that doesn't mean it's wrong. It's a choice, and I'm fine. I mean, I would love us to get to a place where we could all be out and visible and it be accepted and normalized, just as monogamy is.
Good point.
I did find another 4. I forgot. It was similar to the 3s, but this was from Very Well Mind. It was the 4 stages of relationships. So stage 1 was the euphoric stage. So 6 months to 24 months. So 2 years. So that's the honeymoon sort of phase. Stage 2, the early attachment phase. So that's 1 year to 5 years, basically. The crisis stage, this could happen at the 5-year mark to 7 years. So we've all heard of the 7-year itch. And then the deep attachment stage. And they're saying that that's 8, so 7 years and beyond.
Great longevity.
Yes. So it's not the 35 years that you speak about, but it's 7 years and beyond. Okay. The 5s, the 5-5-5 rule. I like this one.
I do as well. This one sounds like it's rather practical, right? So we're asking that we keep in mind that when there's a disagreement in our relationship with our partner, with our friend, whoever it might be, our employer, that we take 5 minutes to speak while the other person is actively listening, right? So they're not just formulating their response or anything else, they're actually really trying to be present for it. And then in the remaining 5 minutes, we give them a chance to speak, or we talk through it. Hang on, I missed it. Sorry. So 5 minutes of me speaking, 5 minutes of you speaking, and then the 5 minutes remaining, we try to talk through it, right? And in doing so, we try to refrain from layering. In other words, we want to really see if we can contain it to one subject, one idea, rather than just stacking it with dishes and having like this whole big thing to have to respond to.
Yeah, and I think the 5 minutes might be a long time to have that one thought. But in that 5 minutes, when it's, if I'm the speaker, I share my one thing. And like you said, the other person actively listens. And then we can practice what we call our 2-minute communication method, which is something we teach, where then the second person who was listening then repeats back what they heard. And then the other person says what they thought. And then you can move on to the next 5 minutes for the person who was originally listening. And then they can share how they feel, and then 5 minutes to work through, where you want to go with all this information, right? So.
Yeah. We've said this multiple times. And again, it may feel rather contrived in the beginning to teach yourself how to speak this way, but it really is so beneficial. And it makes me think back to one of the first times that you and I spoke this way, how it really made me feel seen when you were able to reiterate what I had just said. It was as though you hadn't gone away, but you were present and you really did make the effort. You were really there while I was saying it. You heard me, and then you were making this earnest attempt to make sure that you heard me the way that I wanted to be heard, that what I said, the message sent, was received the way it was sent, and that I would be able to do the same thing for you. It really gives us a feeling that we're trying at least to get on the same page and have a good understanding of each other.
Absolutely. And I think we don't have to agree, but the point of being heard is the win in there, is being able to say what we want to say and knowing that we're heard, even if we come to a place we don't agree on a particular thing. I think if we feel heard, we will be much further ahead than had we just decided to just agree to disagree and not talk about it anymore, which, is sometimes a solution when people choose. So, yeah. Okay, let's get into the 6s rule. So this is a funny one, and this is not dissimilar to Miss Finance. Women with high standards should look for men who are 6 feet tall, with a 6-inch penis, 6-figure salary, and I think some of them say 600 horsepower car and a 6-pack. Oh, and 6 months since their last relationship.
Right, and that makes 6 of the elements, right? 6 criteria to finish it. Yeah, it's interesting that it starts off with women with high standards. So if you do not adhere to this, then does it suggest that you have low standards?
I don't know. I personally, I mean, I've dated people of varying heights, and I am not a tall person. And I have to say, my preference is actually closer in height to me. Because, I mean, when I was with tall people, I think I spent my life like looking up like this. And maybe that's the reason I actually have neck problems, is from looking up all the time.
You dated that much. You dated guys that were that tall, that long. Has created some issue with your neck. Well, that's possible. We'll have to get our chiropractor to take a look at you.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was married. My husband was 6'4". My 10-year relationship, he was probably close to 6 feet, not 6 feet.
Mm-hmm.
I dated someone who was 6'6", which was crazy. Like when, that's just not, no.
So if he's 6'6", he has 2 of the 6s in the 6. Is there one that he's able then to kind of forego?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. And I wonder, women with high standards, what the rule is for women with low standards or no standards, and what standards the guys might have, if they also have any kind of guidelines or criteria that they follow.
Yeah. Well, can you think of any 6 things that you know?
Yeah, but the guys won't let me tell you that. That's private information.
It's private. Well, there's actually, oh no, that's the 9s. I'll get to that later. But
oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. So the 69 rule. So 69 is a fun number for many reasons, but you found a different one.
Yeah, 6 minutes of getting clean, unless being not so clean is your jam, and 9 minutes of fun. We made this up. Again, 9 minutes seems a little short, but okay, it's 69. It was a clever-ish way. So,
yeah.
The 7s?
The 7. So this is another one similar to 222 is every 7 days, go on a date. Every 7 weeks, go away for at least one night. And every 7 months, have a romantic holiday.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this would be more aligned to what I would want. I mean, you can't always do a date every 7 days for various reasons, but I kind of like that.
Mm-hmm. 7 weeks to go away for a night doesn't seem quite enough to my satisfaction, but at least they have 7 months for a romantic holiday. I think that's super fantastic. So in just over a year, we've gone on 2 romantic holidays. And again, they don't have to be very extravagant, big break the bank holidays. We can get creative and find ways to enjoy each other's company rather on the cheap. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we all had to be pretty creative during COVID, right? And we did. And so that means we can get creative. We can do things at home, staycations where we explore things in our cities or towns or nearby areas. There's so much to explore that doesn't cost a lot of money. Okay, the 8s. Mm-hmm. So Jay Shetty is a pretty well known, I think he's a podcaster and author, wrote a book called The 8 Rules of Love.
So quickly, let's go through them. So number 1, let yourself be alone.
Yeah.
That's interesting information. Yeah, that's so important, right? Because I think, are we wanting to find somebody to kind of complete us, or do we already feel complete, right? So what's our motive in wanting to be with other people? And are we good being with ourselves? Because if you can't be happy with yourself, well, then how is it going to work out otherwise? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Number 2, chemistry starts a relationship, but character makes it last.
So I think we find out more about a person once we get further in. So you may be chemically attracted to them, but if you stay the distance, you may realize that it's who they are as a person that you're really attracted to.
And what that says of your character as well, right? Because outside of the chemistry, as you say, if it's not so easy, or it's easier to kind of just kill them off, but you work on it, then it says a lot about your character as well. Number 3, relationships end because patience, kindness, and understanding end.
That's a good one. I like that.
Mm-hmm. So could we kind of keep that in the forefront and ask ourselves, how could we be more understanding? How could we be kinder, more patient? And hopefully the person on the other side of that is also asking themselves, and they are then more considerate, more caring, more understanding as well. We get what we give, hopefully, more often than not.
Yes, I would hope so. I mean, you always say that, sometimes we say things to each other that we would never say in the first week, month, even maybe year of dating. And so remembering that, being patient and kind goes a long way, and, carrying that throughout our relationships.
Number 4, intimacy is more than sex. I think that speaks for itself. Number 5, there are more types of love than romantic love. And it's so interesting, right? When we say, oh, I love this person, well, what does love mean to you, right? There are so many different aspects of it, so many different facets, so many different ways of loving and being loved.
Yeah, and how things like friendship play a role in love and strong relationships. I mean, at the base of it, we are very much good friends and best friends, in fact. And I think that can always form a very solid foundation.
They also go on to say that we should win or lose together.
Oh.
Yeah, interesting, right? Number 7, you don't break in a breakup. So at the moment, it might feel as though your whole world has totally collapsed and it is not survivable, and the world's going to just stop. But in fact, that is not likely to be the case, right? We are not going to completely explode or shatter. We will endure this as well. And number 8, it kind of leads well into that, is we will love and love again.
I love that.
It's interesting, right? For rules of love, that we will love again kind of says, well, what does it say to you, Tara? I mean, love and love again. How do you interpret that?
That there's no one real love for us. We can love many people, and we know this ourselves, being polyamorous. But even if you're not, and you identify as monogamous, even if you felt like you had your true love and something maybe tragic happened or not, things just ended, that you will find love again. There's so many people in the world to love for so many different reasons.
Describing to the universe of abundance.
Absolutely. I was thinking about number 7, though, about you don't break in a breakup. And I was thinking that was more around quietly quitting. So breaking in a breakup. So your intention is to ultimately break up, but you just do so by not just pulling the plug right away when things aren't working, but instead quietly quit and start doing things that maybe makes the other person want to break up, or that just makes life miserable for one or both of all of you.
So you don't do the breaking up in a breakup.
Yeah.
Right. So you
people quietly quit because they think it's easing off, right? And you just can't really ease off a breakup. Sometimes you just have to do it.
But it's interesting because I think the fantasy is, I'll just quietly quit them. I'll just kind of ghost them. I'll just do this thing of not doing anything, and hopefully they'll get the message. It'll just simply go away and everything will be okay.
Okay, the 9s. So I couldn't find a specific rule related to the 9s, but when I did a search, because I was searching 999, I found a book that one could buy and read. Not sure I would recommend this, but it's called 999 Rules, a chick manual for dudes. So I'm really dying to know what the 999 things that chicks need to know about dudes.
A chick manual for dudes. I hope that there's also the dudes manual for chicks.
Probably.
I think that there's a lot that we would benefit by in sharing with each other. It's interesting because sometimes it feels as though the war of the sexes is still being fought, and maybe needs to. But where are the bridges to the sexes? Where are we really creating dialogues to help inform each other in a loving way of what we prefer, what we're wanting, what we're not wanting? How could we meet each other? And maybe a manual like this, even though it sounds like a funny title, maybe it does kind of make that offering that we might get some data, some information, some shared knowledge of each other, and help kind of demystify things, or help also to educate so that we don't continue in patterns that are not so loving, so supporting.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see what the content was. I remember when my marriage ended and I was dating again, and I was having mixed success sort of thing. I read the book called The Rules. It was specifically written for women identifying people who were looking to meet a man who would commit to them, like that specifically it was for. But when I think back to it, it was like super manipulative things that you would do to catch a man. And it was interesting. And I mean, some of those things worked. Like one of the main things was like, don't keep them interested, make them change, that sort of thing. Anyways, that was an interesting book.
I'm curious if you recall who the author was, and was it written by a man or a woman?
I feel like it was written by a woman.
Hmm.
I think there's a lot better advice out there now in terms of like dating and stuff like that. And I follow some people on Instagram and TikTok. There's one that does a podcast called Do the Work. And, you know, it's a lot about attachment and dating. I also have a friend that is in a business program with me that does how to understand your attachment and how that might apply in dating. And so let's move on to 10s. So we're getting near the end. So the 10-10-10 rule. And this is what I was referring to when I was talking about the idea about making decisions early on in a relationship when you're still in that new relationship energy. This is how you might make decisions. So, for example, this might apply when you decide to maybe nest with someone if you're non-monogamous. It looks at the potential impacts of our decisions. When faced with a choice, the idea is to consider the impacts of those decisions over the next 10 minutes, 10 months, and 10 years.
And I suppose, you know, in all fairness, you could change the 10 to whatever timeline might work best for you, right? So what's this decision going to look like over the next 5 minutes, 5 months, 5 years? 10 years for me personally, I don't really think in those terms. It's hard to think in decades. It's just such a big thing and so many things change. But 5 years might be a bit more manageable. So like many of the other examples in the rules that we had, maybe it just needs to be tweaked to your own personal thing, but the ideas behind it, some of them are pretty good actually, right? So before just rushing into it, let's take a moment and consider all of the things, all the benefits and the implications involved in this, and how would it affect me? Pretty good.
There's also the 100-mile rule.
Mm-hmm.
And this is for some people who are maybe more monogamish, for example.
Right.
It's a relationship or arrangement in which partners permit one another to have sexual partners while they are physically apart.
Mm-hmm.
Hence the 100 miles.
Yeah, it makes me think very much about the don't ask, don't tell rule that some people might have, right? So, or the Vegas rule, what happens over there stays over there. So I'm kind of acknowledging that there's a possibility that this might happen, but I'm not really wanting to know the details of it. But there is the credit to them that at least there is the acknowledgement of this. So there is some consent involved in this, right? So it says, well, we have this agreement that when these circumstances present themselves, then we can allow for this. But it is said consensually, it becomes ethical.
And so that's all the numbers we have. So we'd love to hear your take on this and what your some of your favorites were, or if there's others that we didn't cover. So if you're listening on Spotify, which is one of our podcasting platforms, you can actually now add comments. So you can put them in the comments and share your favorite rules. And before we go, a couple of things. And so firstly, we're offering our Poly Newbies digital course, which is an amazing 7-module course, which takes you through all the foundational elements you need to create relationships that are sexy, secure. So this is the link. We'll put it in the show notes. And then finally, we love to do this every week and want to keep this podcast free and reach as many people as possible. So we would love your help. If you hit the like button, subscribe, and share with your friends. And if it feels good, write a review. Awesome. Thanks, Andre.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Have a great day.
Bye.
If you want to explore polyamory, open up a relationship, or try your hand at swinging, we can help. Check out our website at taranandre.com for information on our Poly Newbies digital course or our deeper dive open relationship and polyamory mastery program where you get direct coaching from us. There's also other individual and couples coaching options there as well.
Thanks for listening to the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast with TNA. Don't forget to subscribe and give us some love on your favorite podcasting platform. You can check out the show notes for any of the links to the courses or information we talked about today. Thanks, and have a fantastic and sexy day.